Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks at William & Mary, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, Creating and Executing the Vision for Your Second Act. Today's webinar is part of the William & Mary webinar series and is made possible by the support of the William & Mary Alumni Association. As we seek to provide relevant programming for our lifelong commitment to our alumni, we welcome any feedback and ideas to make this a valuable resource for you. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will notify registrants once the recording is available. Just a few housekeeping items. It's important to note that if you are experiencing any audio or video difficulties, to please call the Adobe Connect technical support number at 1-800-422-3623. Also, questions are welcome throughout today's presentation. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time will allow at the end of her presentation. Please just submit your questions by typing in that box just below the PowerPoint slide deck. And throughout the webinar, I will monitor the questions and share them with our presenter at the end of her presentation. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter this afternoon. Kathy Durdin is living her second act by combining a varied background in management consulting, leadership development, and arts, and applies all of these experiences and disciplines to meet her clients' needs. Kathy has had a broad-based career encompassing client service and organizational management in both the consulting and nonprofit environments. After over 25 years of management consulting experience, Kathy changed her focus to an area about which she has always been passionate, enhancing and encouraging individual development and expanding inclusive leadership. Over 5 years, she envisioned, developed, and implemented the Women's Leadership and Diversity and Inclusion programs at Navigant, in emphasizing leadership development. Working with small groups and one-on-one, she coached individuals on career and skills development to achieve their desired objectives. Now she is sharing her experiences with others, helping organizations better engage with employees, and assisting individuals in furthering their careers, find or reconnect with passions, identify their goals, and achieve their own objectives. Kathy is a certified Hudson Institute coach. Her goal is to help others through programming that supports the organization and the individual in their evolution to meet the business and talent development needs of the 21st century. Among her focuses are individuals in transition, both within their careers and in their roles beyond their careers. Kathy is a proud alumna of William & Mary's Mason School of Business, and we are truly delighted to have Kathy back again on another webinar to join us this afternoon to share her advice with the William & Mary tribe. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you. Late last week, I was at a presentation on workforce development and motivation, and the presenter made the point that employers were worried that their employees weren't motivated because the employees perceived that what they were doing wasn't connected to their individual passions and purpose. I was really connected to the concept of here I was doing a webinar on passions and purpose, and it was being talked about in a completely different context, because we all want that connection, regardless of where we are in our career or our life. What we're going to do today is to walk through a process to identify your passions and craft a plan to explore connecting your purpose and passions to what you would like to do. And then we're going to discuss how to implement a plan to connect them to what you want to do in your second act. I will warn you, this is a half day plus workshop that I'm cramming into 1 hour. There will be no time for exercises or reflections during the workshop. You need to do that afterwards. If you have any questions afterwards while working on the exercises or want to talk about any of this, please give me a call or send me an email. One key point, this process requires a lot of introspection and honesty with yourself. So you really need to think through and be quite honest in answering these questions, because the only person you're really helping is yourself. I've been developing and giving this workshop for several years to a variety of groups. You can see I've compiled a lot of reference materials that's at the back of your worksheet. I was particularly excited when I read the Designing Your Life materials, which were created by professors from the Stanford D School and published last September. They mirrored a lot of my materials, and I've included a few of their worksheets in my recommended exercises. We built this as a webinar about your second act. Many of you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s at different points in your career. Regardless of where you are on your career trajectory, it seems that you're thinking of a second act, either a redirection of your career into something else or a new direction after a long career. The concepts and the process we're going to talk about works for both, as well as for individuals early in their career who want to do something different. Our adult journey is an evolution. We're continually developing and changing. Each new chapter of our adult journey can feel like a different time, starting with the old familiar and guiding by shifting concerns and opportunities. As we grow older, we focus more on individualization and introspection. We are interested in a deeper connection to ourselves and to the larger world as a whole. We've long since given up living somebody else's agenda or plan. We've done a lot of what we set out to do. We don't need external sources of confirmation to validate who we are. We know who we are. However, we want different. We want a compelling sense of purpose in the world. We want to be fully engaged. We know we're capable of creating something new. After all, we've had a long history of accomplishment. So it's time to reassess what's important to us. Some of us are ready to preserve an unlived dream of much earlier years. Others will continue at work at something entirely different, and yet others will want to divest of life's clutter and find ways to make a difference in the world. Remember that our second act can be very scary. It requires courage to step outside our comfort zone. We're steeped in our old habits and routines. We know how to do our current chapter, even though it's no longer satisfying. It seems easier than venturing into the unknown. This terrain is distinctly different from what we've been doing before, the well-traveled roads we've known. To start with, we're going to engage in some deep soul searching around what's important to us at this time in our lives. Then we'll do some brainstorming and visioning and start the planning process, because it's far easier to take the leap into the unknown if you're clear what you're reaching and aspiring to. These goals and aspirations will become your anchor. We have to let go to warm out demands, to old news and empty promises. It can be frightening, particularly if we've spent years holding on, keeping everyone else together, planning, coordinating, and prioritizing. It's hard to let go. It feels risky, but we want to face those risks and consider the possibilities to go wherever our passions lead us. Our purpose and passions change over time. In many instances, however, what we are doing hasn't changed, and we feel out of sorts as a result. We used to feel great about what we were doing, but now it doesn't really interest us, or we feel like we're just going through the motions. We may have had a passion, but little by little we became disconnected. We were once passionate about is no longer important to us, or we have new things we want to achieve. We need to recognize that and be alert for the possibility that our focus is outdated, or that other things are more important to us now. We have some passions we haven't explored as yet, that are now important to us on our next stage of life. So who are we? Well, the first thing to remember is we are not who we were, only older. We've evolved. Suzanne Braun Levine has a great book out there where she's the first editor of Ms., and she interviewed women in their second act. And they reported that they were different from their younger self, and they were kind of interested and amazed about that. They reported things like an impulsive decision to do something out of character, a willingness to take a calculated risk into the unknown, a determination to make contact with one's authentic self and tap that true passion, a desire to be a source of truth to the younger generation, and a delicious freedom of looking at the latest expectation in a lifetime of expectations in the eye and saying, not me, not now. At this time in our lives, we have a deeper perception of what's important to us. This could be a time of great creativity. Creativity might be the big C, artistic expression and external manifestation, or a little c, how we approach things. Creativity can arise from greater attention to the inner life and refocusing on emotional energy with the greater availability of time, resources, and emotional freedom as we transition our working life or in response to our changing priorities and passions. People may experience creativity when their children leave, when they retire, or when they're pursuing the passions they've always wanted to pursue. Research shows that older adults are more in touch with their unconscious feelings and are able to draw on this material with more creativity. It's easier for us to define problems and come up with strategies. Our increased knowledge, emotional history, and social career and life experiences, much more than when we were younger, all add up to resources we can tap during our creative process. We just have to recognize the potential. So what are we going to do today? We're going to start with some foundation work, looking at our core values, our life view, and our work view. Then we're going to explore and articulate our purpose, talk about passions, and then start to plan and start to first brainstorm and visualize the future, and then do some planning. And then we're going to, before we say goodbye, we're going to look at what's stopping us and what we can do to address those forces that are holding us back. And finally, next steps. And I will note that there is a thunderstorm starting where I am in Florida. So I hope it doesn't impact how you can hear me, because it does look kind of ominous out there. So we're going to start with the foundation work on our core values. At any point in our life, we generally have 3 to 4 groups of core values that are very important to us. And a lot of this information is going to be in that worksheet that was sent out to you. You might want to make notes on it right now, but you'll definitely want to do these exercises as you go forward. Each chapter in our adult life has different values based from prior ones. Our experiences and life events impact our priorities. As our priorities change, our expectations shift. And also, as we get older, we want to live closer to our personal values and beliefs. So there are 6 groups of core values that are important to us at various points in time in our lives. And usually it's 3 or 4 that are really important to us. The first one is personal mastery. Now you can imagine this is something that's very important in your young adulthood as you're creating your own identity separate from your family. It's also important to us somewhere in midway along our adult journey as we've invested in those roles that are no longer interesting to us and we're going off and thinking about something new. Closely aligned to that is achievement, reaching goals, having ambition, seeking recognition, conducting, organizing, leading, etc. Again, driving force in that first half of our journey. And it also may relate not only to work-related achievement, but also volunteer family roles, etc. And it also might be important to us in our later years. Another core value is intimacy, and this is not just with your partner, but also with friends, family, children, relatives, etc. Another one is creativity, expressing ourselves. So most of us have spent all our time focused on some of the other core values. And generally, what studies have shown is that creativity and play are not as emphasized as the rest of them, and probably to our own detriment. Search for meaning. This value is particularly important to us in turning points in our lives. And finally, compassion and contribution, finding ways to contribute to the larger world and making a difference that aligns with our values. So I'm going to open up our first polling question here, Michael. You want to bring that over? So I want you to note on your first reaction, which of these core values are most important to you? And while you're doing that, I'm going to talk to you and give you some thoughts on how we are at our different points in our adult journey. Our development works in fits and starts, sometimes going forward, sometimes back. But we're always in periods of transition. We think of ourselves as work in progress, capable of lifelong learning. So in our 40s, this is a time where we're seeking to live a little bit deeper and also really focused on our self away from our original family, and starting to focus on our life and the work that outlives us, and starting to focus on developing the portion of self that's underdeveloped. It's a time for reflection and introspection, which probably explains why a number of you in your 40s have signed up for this webinar. And wow, it looks like achievement and intimacy and play and creativity and compassion and contribution are all about the same. But search for meaning is really important for everyone here. And personal mastery really isn't all that important, which also makes sense. If you're in your second act, you probably know who you are. and that personal mastery is less important. And I see that achievement and intimacy are starting to go way down too. Now, in our 50s, we have a sense of proportion, and we know how to deal with conflict. And it's time to live in the present. And in our 60s, we start to rearrange our priorities, and it's a time of transition. And you can see again why a webinar on something like your second act would be important to people in our 50s and 60s. We can decide who we want to be if we're in our, and we're not stuck with our first choice. And there's concepts like protirement, a blend of work and new opportunities that are important to people. So coming out of our values, I'm going to talk about work view and life view. Have you ever been in a work situation that you just loved, or one that you absolutely hated? Odds are that if you loved it, it was because it was very consistent with your work view. And if you hated it, it was very inconsistent. So what is your work view and life view? Each one of us has one. They change over time, and again, as our circumstances change, but they flow from our core values. We need to be acting consistent with our work view and life view, or we feel disengaged. Are you doing things for the wrong reason? Are your work view and life view consistent or in conflict? Do they support each other? Are you acting contrary to one to support the other? For example, making a conscious decision to stay in a job that may be inconsistent now with your work view to support what's important in your life. You could do that, but recognize you're doing it, and you're going to feel off or less motivated. So your work view, and this is something you're going to reflect on after the fact, after this webinar, is what is work for? Why do you do it? What makes good work good? How important are experience, growth, and fulfillment to you? Note that these could have a big difference depending on where you are in your career. How important is it for you to be involved in supporting society or others? And those don't have to be in an altruistic sense. It could be that you're supporting others through the expansion of technology, or bringing some sort of a good to an underserved area, and you see that as important because it's supporting others. But you can see how all of these change over time. And life view is your idea of the world and how it works. What gives life meaning? What makes your life worthwhile or valuable? How does your life relate to others in your family and community? And what contributes to a satisfying life? So what you want to do after this session is sit down with your worksheet and really reflect on what parts of work view and life view are important to you, because you want to, in the end, be living in accordance with both of those. Our life has more meaning when our behaviors reflect what we value, and we're living in accordance with what we've identified as our purpose. Having a purpose in life, a clear reason to get up in the morning, is essential for growing whole. Human beings seek meaning and purpose. Why am I here? What am I meant to be and to be on earth? A purpose provides a focus for essential things today and a vision for the future. It provides a general direction for our lives and helps us prioritize our day-to-day living. It inspires the activities in our life. It generates our commitment beyond our daily needs. It's some of our yearnings of where we want to go. Note also that it can change over time, and you can see now, if you start to think about things like purpose, life view, work view, how you've evolved, and what your purpose was when you were younger. It may not be your same purpose now. You conceive of new facets of your purpose at different ages and different stages. But we want to feel on purpose at all times. When we act in contradiction with what we value, we feel poorly. Purpose is not the same as goals. It's a force greater than goals. It's an expression of your ultimate concerns. Our core values, our work view, and our life view guide us on our purpose. It comes from our basic belief system. It's authentic enough, it involves us deeply, and aligns with all areas of our life. Frequently, it ties our gifts and passions to something larger than ourselves, benefiting others. May connect to other people or to what we perceive as the bigger picture. We want to see that what we do matters to people other than ourselves. Note that your purpose helps you in decisions as to what's important, setting goals, and creating boundaries. It's so much easier to be sure of what is important to you if you know your purpose. It helps you to focus on what you want to say yes to, so you can say no to what's not important to you. Really helpful in managing priorities, setting boundaries, help you focus on things that really are important to you. Once we know our purpose, we can implement it. We can align our energies with our true priorities and take away from all those other efforts, which when we start to reflect on them, have nothing to do with our purpose, and all they do is leave us drained and frustrated that we're not achieving our purpose. So my purpose is connecting people to passion, inspiring others with the possibility of creativity, helping others to grow, achieve their potential, find their passions, and to connect and discover the humanity in us all. Now, I've dumped an awful lot of stuff in there, and I probably need to narrow it down a little bit more, because realistically, you want your purpose to be down to a couple sentences. Mine's 3, and I need to narrow it down. But what I want you to do after this session also is to create your purpose statement, and this takes some time. Why am I here? It may tie to your passions, to how you want to benefit others, and frequently relates to your interactions with others and the society as a whole. Once you have your purpose, it's important then to talk about passions. Most people don't think they have a passion, or they might have had a passion for their job, but they've lost it. So, do you ever get a sense that you're in the right place at the right time? Is it often? When it happens, what are you doing? We're going to talk about mining experiences in the past to understand what drives you. But again, recognize that our interests and passions change over time. Now, your worksheets have a lot of questions to start jogging your thinking in terms of what your purpose is or your passions are. What makes you get up in the morning? What do you like to think about? What do you really care about? What issues or causes move you? And then there's the 1-year test. What would you do if you had only 1 year to live? To explore our passions and validate them, we're going to talk further about 2 concepts: engagement and energy. Engagement is being intellectually connected to what we do, and energy is getting positive energy from what we do versus being drained. Each of us has unique gifts. We're all best at doing things that we enjoy most and that we're interested in. People are more satisfied when they're doing things that ties to their personal interests. We perform better when we're interested than when we're not. You could think back on things you've done over life, and when you weren't interested, it was really painful to try and do it. Nobody works well at something they don't find interesting. This is when we're most frequently engaged. So it's the concept of engagement. So know your strengths. Do you know your strengths? What you're really good at? What you like? Most doing. Ask people around you, because they really know you and know what you're known for. What do people come to you for? Recognize that some of us are good at things that we're not particularly interested in or don't truly enjoy. And that may be one reason why we feel trapped or stuck. We have to enjoy what we're doing along with being good at it. So think about it. Are you using your gifts to their potential? Does your work give you an opportunity to use your unique gifts, what you're really good at and what you enjoy doing? Does it let you or encourage you to do what you most enjoy doing? So I think we have another polling question. And this is a quick yes or no. Do you know what you're truly good at? No. And it looks like we have a good number that know what they're truly good at, but some that don't. And I would still encourage you to reach out to others to really get some external feedback as to what they perceive you're truly good at and what you're known for. And also think about and doing some self-searching as to what really engages you. And we're going to do an exercise after this that will really help you further explore what you're good at. But I want to move on to the concept of energy. Passions energize us of what we're doing. We've all been in situations that we've been energized, and at the same time situations that drain us completely. So reflect on when you felt really energized, when you felt that connectedness and contribution to what was really meaningful. What was it? And I want you to reflect on how good you felt and how that energy impacts you and your outlook. That energy actually results in changes in the hormones of your brain and positively impacts brain chemistry. And there is a reference, if you're really interested in how that energy really impacts your brain, there's a reference in the reference materials that you'll find Rick Hanson's book really interesting. And on top of energy and engagement, I want to introduce the concept of flow. Think about a time when you were doing work that you were so absorbed that you lost all track of time. That's called flow. Think about how that felt. You were both energized and engaged. Flow is characterized by performing at high levels of challenge and feeling absolutely effortless. So think about the last time you experienced flow. And think about what you were doing and what was it that made it so satisfying. And then search your memories and think of other times. Usually when we're in flow, it can be in a situation where we were experiencing just the most amazing requirement. And it seemed absolutely daunting. But yet your adrenaline kicked in and your skills kicked in and you were just kicking on all cylinders. And it ended up working great. And when you reflect on it, you were like amazed. I can't believe I actually achieved that. So that's the concept of flow. And we've got another polling question. And I want you to think about, when was the last time you experienced flow? Now recognize that there are certain things that impact our energy, engagement, and flow, and one of them is environment. And it may be that when you're reflecting upon some of these things, that your environment is coloring how you're perceiving the situation. And it may be that you need to change your environment. In your materials are the Design Your Life Energy Engagement worksheet and the Good Time Journal. And I really encourage you to go through those and actually do this offline over time, take a couple weeks, and really reflect on what energizes you and what drains you and what really engages you, and identify when you're in flow. And you're going to use this as something that you learn about yourself. Now it looks like some of us, it's been a while since we were really in flow. And so that's another reason to kind of reflect upon what is it and that has caused us to be in flow, and how can you recapture that? So I want to transition now from this foundation work where we've done some soul searching and really done some identification with who we are and what really matters to us and what energizes us, engages us, and talk and do some planning. It's time to think of that blueprint for the future. Do you want to test an outrageous dream? Because if not now, when? Think back to your youth. What were your dreams? And is it time to try one or two? Test new kinds of work. Maybe you've had a dream that's vastly different from what you've done. Or you might want to think about your legacy. Is the life you're creating that legacy? What will the world remember, and what will your children remember? So before we start planning, I want you to do some personal brainstorming. And I want your mind to wander to your next chapter, to merge to all its dimensions, thinking about your personal life, your activity, people that you connect with. And at this point, I want you to take constraints off. Give yourself permission to dream, without censoring yourself about time, money, or other pressing issues. Simply imagine your preferred future with you at your best. Where will you be? Who will you be with? What will you be about? What will be important to you, providing meaning, happiness, and security? And how will you be at work, home, travel, creative activities? Now, you can brainstorm in various different ways, but I'm going to suggest that we use mind mapping. And mind mapping is a technique that causes you to actively engage in unconventional thinking. They're a way to come up with ideas or to gain clarity about a topic. The further you get from the center of the map, the more hidden ideas you uncover. So you don't want to censor yourself too early. You want to brainstorm and brainstorm and brainstorm. And then you can also see where your ideas came from. Now, I've done a little mind mapping here, and what I want you to do is at least 3 mind maps. One based on energy from when you've identified from your energy information or your energy self-reflection. One based on engagement and one based on flow. You start with an idea, put it in the middle, and then you brainstorm ideas off of that, and then brainstorm ideas off of those ideas that you brainstormed off of, and keep moving out away from the center, and just think about the one circle and come up with ideas to take it out of that other circle. And then once you're done, start to think about connections and ideas that come from this. Do you see themes and patterns both within one mind map and also through the various mind maps? And those will start to give you some ideas about where you might want to go in the future. So you really start to look for patterns of what has really intrigued me. And so now we're going to do a little bit more planning, but still being very much in the dream stage, but starting to be a little bit more concrete. The key concept here is that we have no one right alternative. We have many possible lives. So what we want to do at this point is to start to write out and explore what those possible lives are, recognizing that this is not plan A, B, or C. This is a bunch of plan A's. There are a bunch of plan A's available to us, and it's just a matter of picking the one that we feel like doing. So think about this. One way of doing this, and this is something from Design Your Life, and you'll use the Design Your Life Odyssey planning worksheet for this. 3 versions of yourself: the life you do, the thing you do if thing 1 were gone, and then what you do if money and image and what people thought of you was absolutely no object. Now, if you're thinking about something new, again, look at those themes from your mind map and start and identify a couple areas that you might like. And again, but keeping the idea of thing 1, what you do if the first one wasn't available, and something that's truly outrageous, that if money and image were no object. And when you're doing this 5-year plan or 5-year ideation, and think of it as an ideation, you want to include all aspects of your life, career, family, etc. You want to give it a name, each one of them, and then look at what questions you need to answer on each one of these. What do you need to test and explore? You also want to gauge your resources available to you, whether you like it or not, your confidence in potential success, and your coherence of this with your life view and your work view. Now, once you've done that, let's say you want to do something new. You need more information because we usually don't know what we don't know. We want to start that exploration by experimenting. Experience shows us that we rarely identify what we need to change, as well as what is feasible and appealing at the beginning of any transition, because our view is constrained by what we know. We need new information, and we need to investigate our ideas to see if they're feasible and how we relate to them. This process is very iterative. We explore, we recognize, we dismantle assumptions, we question, we go back to the drawing board. Experimenting is testing our possible selves, trying on new roles on a small scale. It provides the first steps in taking our ideas and moving them into a practical search or a practical plan. It's bringing our possible selves in the world to evaluate them more closely. Think of it as trial activities. It also involves, in a lot of instances, reaching out to new colleagues, new environments, new networks, because we're trying on new ideas with new groups of people. And generally, we need to be in new groups of people to find out new information, because our old networks really can't provide that information because all they know is what we know. So think about the types of things you want to learn, what types of tasks you want to do, and then start to do a little experimentation. You want to do a broad range of things. You want to keep a couple things going at any point in time, so you can compare and contrast. The other thing you want to make sure you do is to take preconceived ideas off the table and be very honest with yourself. A lot of times we go into experimenting and we think, oh, I must like this because. And we ignore that little thing in the back of our head that says, oh, I really don't like what I'm doing here. And we just, we negate it. We say, well, that mustn't be true because I must like this. Don't do that. Make sure that we're really honest with ourselves, because it's an experimentation stage. You're trying something on and you're seeing if it works. What keeps us from getting started? Well, a lot of times we just are stuck. Multiple things contribute to our being stuck. Being comfortable in our old ways and old roles, even if they're not working. Fear of risk and fear of moving outside of our comfort zone. A story of ourselves based upon our past. Voices in our heads. Actual external and internal barriers. And being tied to our own networks and contacts, which are reinforcing those old assumptions about ourselves. Now you can start to think about all sorts of things about why you're stuck. By identifying why we're stuck, we can start to work on those issues and develop some personal strategies to think about them, to address them. So I want to ask you another polling question and be honest. Why are you stuck? Just start to think about that and jot some things down. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start mentioning something called gravity and anchor problems. Gravity problems are ones we can't solve. They're like gravity. They're just there. Poets don't make a lot of money. There's not a lot of need for ski instructors in Florida. Things that you just can't change. But a lot of times what we see as a gravity problem may be just an anchor problem. Anchor problems are problems we create for ourselves that keep us stuck, frequently based on how we see things or being stuck in a view of what we want, a vision of what we think this life must be. And they can be changed by reframing. So I want to look at some of your answers. And some of them are what we typically see. It's comfortable where I am, or I have too many choices and I don't know which way to go, which is why we want to experiment and see those 3 different ways and start to do some experimentation. Not knowing what we want, that's when you experiment. Seeing possibilities only in terms of recent experiment and experience. And again, that's why we have to go out and see what we don't know and really explore. Financial concerns and concerns about impact of changing careers based upon things like financial needs. And for those situations, I would really recommend, we're not going through it today, but there's some great materials in the reference materials on job crafting, where you can actually take, identify your purpose and your passion, and then look at what you're currently doing and see if you can restructure your job to what would be more engaging for you if you try some different things about restructuring the job, recrafting, emphasizing the things that really tie to your purpose and passions. And I'm going to talk about a number of these and starting to think about which, what we can do to get ourselves unstuck. So, Michael, if you would close the poll. Thank you. So what I want you to reflect on again is what we are seeing and what is causing us to find scary about the future and the risks. And in your worksheet, there is a section on listing out what's scary about the future. And for each scary point, I want you to think about some activities that you could do to make it less scary. Research you could do, interviews you could do, etc. And you may want to go back and add some activities as you go through and do some of your experimenting. There's also a section on being too comfortable because it's so familiar and we don't want to let go. So think about the things that are causing you to be comfortable and think about how you can address them. And also those perceived risks and how to address those perceived risks about the future. Now, the other thing that is holding us back are some voices in our heads, our spouses, parents, friends, etc., that tell us things that hold us back, and they become boulders in our path. We all have a notion of who these people are. Frequently, we hear their voice saying things that you can't do something, or you're not good at something. And what you want to do is take that and potentially reframe it. Reframe it based upon your experience and your resilience in other areas. If you, for example, say, I'm not good at networking, well, think about it and think about the networks you've created and recognize that you actually are very good at something like networking. So again, figuring out those things that are really holding us back and looking a way to reframe to move ourselves forward. So we've talked about an awful lot of stuff. And this, as I said, I crammed a whole half a day's workshop. There's a lot of exercises. And what you typically would do if we were in a workshop setting is we do each one of these and debrief and share with others and give feedback. So you don't have that situation in this 1 hour webinar. But it does help to find somebody to work through this process with you. What are you going to do with all of this? Well, it all depends on you and where you are in your journey. When you're ready, you can start planning. You can take your purpose and vision and break it down into goals, objectives, action steps, and timelines. And keep updating that plan over time. In your worksheet, there are 3 concepts: hold on, let go, and take on. You can hold on to activities you want to do more of. You want to let go of activities that you want to do less of or stop doing altogether because they're inconsistent with your purpose and passions or wherever you want to go in the future. You're not aligned with what's really important to you. And there's new activities you want to take on. You can create a vision board and post it somewhere you can see it and be inspired. And you want to identify those experiments to start out, to try something that you're thinking, and think about what you learn and revise your plans. And remember that you are amazing and you can do this. So Michael, I think it's time for questions.
Great. Well, first off, thank you, Kathy, for another terrific webinar. Always feel like I continue to learn from your expertise and appreciate you giving so much of your time and talents back to the William & Mary community. For those of you that didn't get a chance in the beginning to download the worksheets that Kathy referenced and put together for you today, as well as a PDF of today's presentation, so the PowerPoint file that Kathy used, you can download that as well. Feel free to download these at any point. Again, if you have a question that you would like me to ask Kathy, please feel free to type it into the Q&A box just below that questions slide. And there was a point going back to your flow question that I think is important to think about. Is one person commented about their feeling like they're in flow when they're in their personal life, but not in flow in their work life. And I thought that would be interesting to ask your thoughts on that one and kind of the reflection of sort of, is it necessary to have flow in both at all times? Is it okay to have your personal life balance out things that you're not feeling in your work life and so forth? Or should you always find flow in both scenarios, and that's true happiness?
Well, I think that the first thing to do is look at your work view and you really understand your work view and see whether what you're doing is tied to what is important to you from a work standpoint and what's important, and go through those activities and look at your work from an energy and engagement standpoint as to what really energizes you at work and what engages you at work. And if you're in a situation where you're neither energized nor engaged at work, then you've got to, if you come to the conclusion that you can't leave your work, then I would again recommend going through the job crafting materials. We didn't go through that in today's webinar, but it's in the resources, and it talks about taking your work and breaking it down into pieces so that you can figure out what you really are engaged by and what you're not engaged by and energized by, and figuring out what you can do more of, what you can get recraft or give off to somebody else, etc. And also, what is it about your work that you can tie to your purpose and passions? Because you're going to feel out of sorts if your work if you're not energized by your work. It goes back to the Studs Terkel quote that I didn't use in here. That is, some of us are live through a Monday through Friday sort of dying, and that's what it feels like. It's dying, and we want to have a Monday through Friday sort of living.
Good quote. So another question here is, how long should our experiments with the new tasks or jobs last?
Well, you don't want to get to the point where you can get so wrapped up in experiments that you kind of experiment and just get wrapped up and stay in the experimentation stage. You need to have a plan, and really go through those experiments, what you're learning, and have a plan for what you plan to learn from those experiments. And take that learning and then recraft your experiment, recraft your plan, etc. But you also want to be narrowing down your experiments and coming up with new hypotheses, and start first with exploratory and then get to some confirmation experiments. But as long as you're still learning, and you're learning really important stuff, then it's good. But if your learning starts to drop off, then it's time to narrow it down and move on.
Great. Before we get to the next question, I'm just going to take a moment while we can to do a quick survey. So hopefully in your browsers you'll see a survey pop up. Go ahead and take a moment between now and your next activity to complete that. It shouldn't take more than a minute. But going back to the Q&A, all you have to do is just go back to close out that little survey, and you'll see your screen back, and you can type in the Q&A box again to join us. So another question here: could you provide more details about the experimentation process? Is there something that you would recommend?
Okay. Well, it depends on what you're experimenting, but you're trying on new roles and new activities and new groups. So think about what groups you need to join, what organizations, local organizations. When I got into coaching, I joined the local ICF chapter to start to network with a whole new group of people to network with. It may be volunteering for organizations where you're going to try on a activity. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and when we were talking about experimenting and volunteering, she had a couple volunteer ideas of how she could experiment. Some of it is research. Some of it is also going to be interviewing people. Because remember, what you're doing with experimenting is learning stuff you don't know. And we don't know what we don't know. So we need to get out there into other networks, into other activities, into things that are unfamiliar to us, and learn the stuff that we don't know. We don't know. It's maybe industries that we don't know. Well, we're coming at these things from our perspective, and that's constrained by our knowledge. And that knowledge of what's going on in another industry is, we may not have it. So interviewing people in that industry might be the best place to start before you even go off and start to do some volunteering or shadowing or trial runs or things like that.
And Kathy, I'll just take a moment to do a shameless plug. I mean, the William & Mary community of alumni is a great cross-section of professionals in all different experiences and backgrounds that you could use your affinity to William & Mary to explore and do that research with one another, whether it's in your local regions or through tools like LinkedIn and finding people, as well as a new platform that we're going to launch this week called the Switchboard, which is designed for ask, offering, and connecting with fellow alumni. So I think that's another way to look at some of the experimentation and research that she's pointing out, is to look at one another. Those of you that joined us today are obviously interested in this topic and wanting to see great things come out of it. So helping one another explore that through your own backgrounds. You're all coming from different expertise. So I think that's a great way to experiment as well. So one additional question here, Kathy, could you talk a little bit more about the boulders, the voices in the head? How do you actually circumvent them?
That takes work, because first it's understanding who they are and what they're saying to you, and recognizing how what they're saying to you is keeping you from moving on, and how you can recraft what they're saying to you. Generally, they're saying negative things to you, and you want to recraft that in a way, first of all, drawing upon your successes in the past to reframe that negative voice into a positive voice. Frequently, those boulders are somebody else's vision of who you are and what you're good at, which are holding us back. Does that answer the question, Michael?
I think it answers. It gives a good direction, and that person can certainly follow up if they feel they need more information.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think, for women, our mothers said things to us, and it's still back there, or it's back on how we got validated and what we were rewarded as successful as children. And that can be holding us back. So it takes a little bit of introspection to figure out where it's coming from. But once you know where it's coming from and what it is, then you can start to address it.
Great. Without getting into the politics of some of the things going on today, but I think there's a lot of people's mindset in this stage of their career looking at the cost, the financial burdens, especially around healthcare. And I think, what advice would you give them related to sort of basing the financial piece of the puzzle that you referenced, not knowing sort of the direction and sort of the necessary, a lot of people are not able to take risks that you suggested just because of their benefits that they need for their family or for themselves for health purposes. And what advice would you give individuals in that circumstance?
Well, two things. One, the point I made about job crafting and try and rework the job you have to make it more tied to your passion. Identify what your passion is and your purpose, and then live that in your job to the extent possible, live it every day. But also recognize that you can play out your passions and your purpose outside of your work. So it may be volunteer organizations or extracurricular organizations that you can join and get involved in that will allow you to really focus on your passions and your purpose outside of your work. And I think also recognizing how our work, that we've made this trade-off on, and a very valid trade-off because of the financial constraints of the need to potentially keep healthcare in place, that that knowledge that we've made a conscious decision can help us understand why we feel less than motivated with what we're doing, and find ways to get ourselves motivated by seeing how we can try and find some passion and purpose in what we're doing at work.
Great. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. Here's another one related to some of the advice around changing your careers. And I guess the question is there a right time? When do you notice a lot of people changing their careers? Is it their 40s, their 50s? And how common is such a pivot in the population of working and able-bodied folks, actually like changing career mid-path?
It depends on what's right for you and what kind of career change you're thinking about. If you're disengaged with what you're doing, then it's the right time for you. And hopefully you can perceive that you're disengaged, that you see yourself becoming disengaged, and start to explore the possibilities so that you can do that exploration while you're still working in your current employer. And I think people change a lot more than you think. The other thing to remember is, what was I hearing? That at Accenture, 1/4 of the jobs that exist today didn't exist 4 years ago or something like that. And I mean, that's the other thing that's happening is, the days of staying in the same position and the same role, and even the same role being the same role, have gone by the wayside just because things change so dramatically over time. So by staying in the same role, we're actually not thinking about the possibilities that are available to us because the world is changing so fast. And it's time to take those blinders off and really consider the possibilities.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one final question that I'm going to take this one. And first I'll say thank you, Kathy, for a terrific webinar, another excellent production of yours. So thank you so much for all that you're doing for the tribe and for all these great alumni around the world. If you were to summarize, you've provided so many great resources in your packet and all these great books that you've read. But if there were 3 that people said this summer they want to read, what would you recommend for the top second act encore career books out there today that you think would give people great guidance as the fall approaches? And your top, as the expert, what top 3? Not necessarily endorsing them, but certainly just highlighting some really great ones out there.
Well, what I really love is Hermione Ibarra's Working Identity, which goes into the different steps and processes that one goes through to identify what, first starting out the process of rethinking what one is doing and then going through the process of getting to where I want to be. I think that's really, it really depends on what you're trying to get. If you're trying to understand purpose and passion, Whistle While You Work or the Power of Purpose are useful books. I love Designing Your Life as a Step-by-Step Ideation Process, which is very, very, very readable. All of these are easy to put on your iPad and or Kindle or whatever. And for women, Suzanne Braun Levine's book is a great book for seeing yourself and recognizing that Everything that you feel about yourself in your 50s and 60s is not unusual, and in fact, everybody else is doing the same thing.
Terrific. And I think everyone's got some good books to go check out online or in their libraries. And again, Kathy has graciously agreed to share her contact information and speak with each of you